All right, hello everybody. There's so many of you. Exactly what we wanted to see. All right, welcome to the Candidates Forum for the New York State 103rd Assembly District's Democratic Primary, sponsored by the Kingston Wire and the Hudson Valley Pilot, which is a new digital news site for Rhinebeck and its environs. I am Jasmine Schiffer. I'm a reporter and columnist for the Kingston Wire and the Shawangunk Journal. So first, there's a lot of people we have to thank for putting this whole beautiful thing together. First of all, the Old Dutch Church and Pastor Rob Sweeney for letting us use this beautiful historic space. And our candidates, Sarahana Shrestha and Gabby Madden. We'd like to thank Carl Weldon, soundman extraordinaire, my personal friend. And Panda TV, who is broadcasting tonight's event on Channel 23. And of course, I'd like to thank all of you for coming out here and supporting open debate and democracy, all that good stuff. Okay, so here's how tonight's forum will work. Each candidate will start with a 2-minute opening statement, and we'll do a coin toss to see who goes first. I have to do the coin toss. We'll see how that goes. Then we'll have our moderator Q&A portion. Some of the questions are written by our moderators. Others we've been collecting from readers over the past few weeks. And the candidates have not been informed of these questions in advance. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the question, and the other candidate gets a 1-minute rebuttal. All of this should take about an hour, we're thinking. And we have our wonderful timekeeper, Robin, down here, who will let the candidates know how to keep on track with their timing. Okay, so after that, we'll have about half an hour of audience questions. And that is something that will start as soon as I get off the stage. I will be passing out some index cards and pencils for all of you. Whoever wants to write down a question, just hold it up when you're done writing it. I will come get it. We'll collect those. The editorial team will go through them, and we'll pick a selection to put to our candidates. Okay, and then to wrap everything up, each candidate will get a 2-minute closing statement. That wraps that up. So for a few extra ground rules, we ask that you hold your applause, foot stomping, craziness, all of that until the end of the debate. Time is tight. We want to make sure everybody has enough time to speak. Carl already said silence your electronic devices. Photos are fine, but turn the flash off. And if it gets too hot in here, I know we're all sweating. The AC is in that room over there. There's also bathrooms if anybody's getting too hot. Okay, so now it's time to get this off the ground, so I'd like to officially introduce everybody behind me. First, we have our moderators. This is Dan Barton. Dan is a lifelong Hudson Valley resident, has covered Ulster and Dutchess counties for 35 years, and he's currently the managing editor of the Kingston Wire and interim editor of the Shawangunk Journal. Now we have over here Eric Steinem. He's a writer, editor, and journalist based in Rhinebeck. He has been covering food, social issues, politics, and the arts for over 2 decades, and was previously the editor of Edible Hudson Valley magazine. He is now the executive editor of Hudson Valley Pilot. All right, and our candidates, starting with incumbent Sarahana Shrestha. She was born and raised in Kathmandu, Nepal, and became a naturalized American citizen at the Ulster County Courthouse in 2019. Shrestha has worked as a climate activist and organizer prior to her election to the New York State Assembly in 2022. This is her first re-election campaign. Okay, and over here we have her challenger, Gabby Madden. She's a Bloomington resident who has worked as a staffer for former Assembly member Kevin Cahill and Senator James Skoufis. While working for Cahill as constituent representative and communications liaison, she also served as clerk of the Assembly Insurance Committee. She was deputy chief of staff for Skoufis. This is Madden's first run for public office. All right. That's about all I have to say. Now it's time for the coin toss. Everybody wish me luck. Yeah, as she just said, I'm reinforcing the fact that we want to end the applause after this. We want to make sure this is peaceful for all speakers up here. Don't drop it.
Yes.
I knew I was going to mess it up, guys.
Yeah.
We have to call it somehow.
Okay. So,
Well, in football, the home team gets to, or no, the visitor gets to choose, right?
Right? Okay.
So the challenger choose head or tails.
Sure thing, heads.
Heads? Okay. It is tails.
All right.
okay,
Okay.
All right. Well, you receive the kickoff. And,
all right. You're the first question.
we're doing opening statements first, right?
Oh, of course, sorry.
Okay.
Take it away. Awesome. So I think I'll start off with my opening statement then, folks. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate everyone coming out tonight. My name is Gabby Madden, and I am running to serve as your next state assembly member representing District 103, encompassing Ulster and Dutchess counties, 14 municipalities, and just over 130,000 constituents. I was born and raised in Kingston, New York, got started in public service right after graduating college in 2018, serving in Assembly Member Kevin Cahill's office, working primarily with constituent service work is what got me hooked on public service. Getting to problem solve on behalf of the communities that helped to raise me, getting to help streamline government bureaucracy and prove that government can work as it was intended, and restoring that faith really is what got me hooked on public service, and I've been working in it ever since. So the past 6 years, I've had the honor of serving in the legislative majority, both in the state assembly as well as the state senate, advancing some of the most progressive pieces of policy in New York State history, including the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, the Reproductive Health Act, which codified Roe v. Wade in New York State, among many others. But my real passion is serving the people of this district. That should be the #1 priority of any of our representatives. And that's the reason I decided to run, because I think this community deserves better representation, deserves someone that's going to work hand in hand with them to put forward real solutions to the real problems that we face here. I know that I have the tools and the skills to really serve this district, and I want to perform, and I want to make sure that I'm inspiring others to also perform for this district and run for office. And so I'm confident that I have the skills, again, to really serve this community, to raise the standard of governance here in District 103, and to bring the next generation of representation to the Mid-Hudson Valley. Thank you.
Yep, come on.
Sorry.
Please hold your applause.
Okay, Sarah Hunter.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Hannah Shrestha, and for the first time, I feel like I'm in some sort of athletic competition, the NBA Finals or something like that. It is also hot, which, adds to that atmosphere. So I am the incumbent assembly member of District 103rd, which is 14 localities in the Mid-Hudson Valley. I ran in 2022 because I had a disappointing meeting with my predecessor on a bill called the Build Public Renewables Act, and I challenged him because we don't have term limits, and we knocked over 56,000 doors to get this seat. We rejected corporate donations, and part of the reason why I ran is because as a climate organizer who was meeting with a lot of legislative directors in Albany and a lot of representatives themselves, I got a sense of what holds things up in Albany. The corporate influence is outsized, and now that I'm on the inside, I can confirm that the real estate lobby, the charter school lobby, they are all negotiating with us directly at the table when we are working on the budget, for example, and that should not be the case because the people we represent don't have the same kind of representation in those processes. So I ran to break from the status status quo, to break from corporate donors, and to take advantage of the fact that we have a Democratic supermajority in New York, which means that there are lots of opportunities to get things done, so why aren't we getting them done? And we need a strategy that I like to call inside-outside strategy to bring people into the political process to get things done. And that's how I passed the main bill that I campaigned on, called the Bill Public Renewables Act. We wrote this bill with the Public Power Coalition because New York passed the CLCPA in 2019 thanks to the climate movement, but the state did not do anything to implement it for 3 years. How are we going to meet our climate goals? So we wrote this bill to authorize the New York Power Authority to make New York's own publicly owned renewable energy and to use those revenues to fund automatic discounts for low and moderate income households, and to create gold standard labor language for the first time in the renewable sector. And everybody told me this bill was great. Too bad it was never going to pass. So I got elected. The mandate for my election was this bill. We passed it within the first 6 months with the strongest version possible, including the union language. We also passed another bill that was very difficult to pass, the LLC Transparency Act. We don't know who owns LLCs. There's an anonymity that is positioned against tenants, against people who need justice in court, and so on. So this is going to be a landmark bill that is going to, for the first time, create a database for who are the beneficial owners behind LLCs. In my second year, I passed...
Time.
Oh, no problem. I passed a lot of things is the short answer. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll begin with the questions from the moderators. And this question is for both of you, and Sarah Hanna, you will respond first, please. How's this? Considering how important Democratic primaries have become in recent years in both Dutchess and Ulster counties, do you support some kind of open primary or ranked choice voting system to bring more voters into the process?
Yes, so I ran for a Democratic primary against, a lot of discomfort from a lot of people who thought that it was not my place to run in a primary, but I do believe Democratic primaries are a way to hold each other accountable, and is also a way to do a check on how people are feeling about what the status quo is doing. I also support ranked choice voting because whatever helps people to make choices that truly reflect their values is better for our democracy. The fact is, I've spoken to a lot of people, thousands of people in this district, and many of them don't fit in clean this bucket or this bucket. They have many overlaps across many issues. So anything we can expand to do to expand democratic rights, voting rights, I'm all for them, and I co-sponsor a lot of these bills for that reason.
Awesome. So yes, I would be supportive of expanding our primary elections. I think that it's important that we're engaging as many people as possible within our democracy. Again, it's a time where we need to work to restore faith in government. So I think by addressing some of these election issues that exist right now and working off the progress we made with election reform, getting the even year election bill passed, making sure we had early mail-in ballots with prepaid postage, these are all efforts that I have been involved in. And so anything I can do to advance voting rights and make sure that we're expanding the electoral process for all of our constituents and ensuring that constituents feel confident when casting their ballot. I think that's really key, and I think that expanding our primaries would lend itself to all of those areas.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you both. Thank you, everyone, for being here. This first question of mine seems appropriate. This first question of mine seems appropriate because it's about Central Hudson, and it's very hot in here. You both support a public takeover of Central Hudson. Why is your plan better than your opponent's, and how might your plans differ from one another? I'm going to go to you first.
Sure
Gabby.
thing. So I approached Central Hudson with a multi-pronged solution here, because we know that Central Hudson has been an issue for years now, and so we need to be providing immediate relief for our constituents while working towards those midterm and long-term sustainable goals. That's how we should approach any legislative issue that our constituents are facing. And so I think that my solution is a lot more realistic and, again, going to provide for immediate relief by addressing those delivery fees. I'm sure that you folks have seen on your bill that a majority of the cost is going towards these delivery fees. The rate hike proposal currently under review that looks like it's going to be approved in July and go into effect as soon as August 1st. Again, on the watch of our current incumbent, that's all with regard to delivery fees. So if we were able to rein in those delivery fees, then we would be addressing those issues and providing that immediate relief. So two pieces of legislation that I would want to advance immediately within the State Assembly, which would standardize the methodology used to calculate delivery fees and setting a cap so that we can keep those delivery fees reined in. The second bill would be differentiating the way in which gas and electric is charged. So right now they are charged at the same rate, but gas requires a lot more infrastructure to deliver. Therefore, it should not be charged at the same rate as gas. And so by advancing those two pieces of legislation, we would provide immediate relief with regard to delivery fees. The midterm approach that I would be working towards, in addition to that immediate and long-term solution, is re-regulating supply and hedging practices in New York State, deregulated in 1996 in an effort to build competition. Where's the competition? It doesn't exist. So we want to make sure that we are re-regulating supply and hedging practices in New York State and doing a deep dive into the Department of Public Service and the Public Service Commission housed within, that is the designated enforcement power here in New York State with regard to our utilities. And so I want to ensure that they're acting in the best interest of our consumers rather than that of the utility provider. And by doing so, we would be reviewing how these rate hike proposals were approved year after year, why some of these loopholes that Central Hudson is pursuing that this department is well aware of, why they're not addressing those. And if they need enforcement powers expanded, that's the job of the state legislature. So that's what I would be doing. And then, of course,
Okay, that's time.
Public utility using a municipal cooperative model, which already exists in New York State.
Okay, thank you so much, Gabby.
Absolutely.
I want to give Sarah Hanna a chance to respond.
Yes, so first of all, Central Hudson is in the business of delivery, so anything we do to supply sector, as much as we want to do those things, is not going to change anything about Central Hudson. I have introduced 5 bills to change the profit over people model of Central Hudson, ranging from short term to medium term to long term, because what is unrealistic is for Central Hudson to continue as is and to have a utility regulatory system that ultimately favors these corporate monopolies than it does ratepayers, which is a fact. They are allowed to pass any cost to ratepayers. Of the 2 bills that my opponent mentioned, they are not going to do anything. That is a drop in the bucket. But the first one, actually, according to our analysis, would increase the return of equity for Central Hudson because they are doing so badly right now, and that is not the way to regulate these delivery utilities. The other thing is, municipal cooperatives exist in the state, but so do fully public authorities, such as New York Power Authority, which was created by FDR. If we were to do municipal cooperatives, we would have to chop up the Central Hudson service territory in many little pieces, and each municipality would have to agree to buy that piece, and it would also increase the valuation of Central Hudson, because when you chop up the service territory, they can mark up the price on each of those little pieces. So my bill with Senator Hinchey to do a takeover of Central Hudson by a Hudson Valley Power Authority, of which the goal would be lower rates and to be in the service of ratepayers, is a fully coherent and comprehensive bill. HudsonValleyPowerAuthority.com is where you can see a lot of the FAQ, and this is based on a model that has been tried since the 70s successfully in Messina, New York, and San Diego is doing something similar. So we are very connected to the public power movement all over the country as well as the world to put this bill forward to have a best version possible.
Okay, thank you so much.
Would I be able to just?
Yeah, you have 1 minute to respond.
Awesome, okay. So with regard to a public utility, I think that it's important that we're talking about the timeline here. So this would take at least a decade to actually become implemented, requiring the buy-in of neighboring legislative representatives who also represent Central Hudson service territory. It's going to take at least a decade, again, to actually get to a public utility model. And we want to make sure that we're utilizing the resources made available through the state. So as we reach these these deadlines set forth in the CLCPA, there's going to be a lot more state resources made available to municipalities to make that transition. So we can tap into those funding resources to help our municipalities actually adopt that municipal cooperative model, which can be shared across multiple municipalities. And I think it's also important that, again, we're bringing realistic relief that's going to be immediate. And that's why addressing those delivery fees, despite the argument that my opponent had raised, is so crucial. And so when we're putting forth this big box proposal that we know isn't going to come to fruition in at least 10 years, I question, what are we doing right now in real time for our constituents that's going to provide them immediate relief when they needed it last year? Are we going to have to experience another rate hike proposal? Again, we were able to keep those rate hikes at bay, and then we had another proposal approved the past 2 years.
Okay.
Okay, that's time.
Thank you, Gabby.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Okay. This question is for both candidates. Do you support or oppose the governor's recent decision to shelve congestion pricing for Manhattan Central Business District? If you support the shelving, how should the MTA fill its unexpected budget gap? If you want congestion pricing to move forward, do you support finding a way to shield your constituents from having to pay the tolls?
Me first?
Yeah, you first.
Okay. First of all, I want to say if we pass this Central Hudson bill in 10 years, about 1 million people would be very, very happy.
Wait,
But congestion pricing.
I'm sorry, Sarah Hannah.
Congestion pricing.
Let's stick with the question, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Congestion pricing, the governor walked back on a law that was already passed, that was days away from being implemented. I was amongst the people who helped to successfully not bail out the governor on her very bad plan because it was going to compromise a lot of capital projects that are underway for MTA, including a lot of ADA accessibility, things like that. And it's most of the working class people who use public transit, and it is already a nightmare to drive in Manhattan below 68th Street. So congestion pricing is actually widely popular based on the emails I've been getting from my constituents, especially people who are concerned about public transit rights as well as the consideration for the climate and the environment. So both the Senate and the Assembly was able to successfully say no to bailing out the governor's backtrack on congestion pricing.
So I think it's really important that we're addressing climate change, and I know that that's what the intent of congestion pricing was. However, I do not want it to fall on the backs of my constituents. We are already experiencing a tremendous value gap with regard to services received versus cost to our constituents in Northern Dutchess. We do not have access to MTA like other parts of Dutchess County. Meanwhile, we're paying the same amount in those DMV fees, in those payroll mobility taxes. That's a value gap that exists, and so we are not going to foot the bill any longer for MTA services. That cost is over $40 million, that value gap. And so when are we going to get our fair share? My opponent is the co-sponsor of a bill that funnels money into the MTA without having to be reappropriated year after year by the state legislature. That's the only mechanism we have to rein in the cost of MTA that's falling on our shoulders when we don't receive those services upstate. And so I would want to be addressing that value gap, ensuring that we're actually getting services to our district and before we're going to pay further into MTA services with this congestion pricing. I mean, this is over $30 to get into Manhattan when you're going maybe for your first job interview, for example. That's unacceptable. Again, where are our MTA services? That value gap is tremendous, and it's falling on the backs of our constituents, our hospitals, our municipalities, our school districts. That's shameful. So I would not support congestion pricing as it stands, and I'm glad that it was tabled. I think there's other ways to address climate change that aren't going to impact my constituents back at home, and that's my #1 priority as your representative.
Okay. Please hold the applause, please.
Sarah Hannah, would you like a minute to rebut?
Yes, please. So the congestion, the MTA funding that we passed both last year and this year does not do upstate payroll mobility tax. It is only New York City, so let's get that right. The second thing is I do not like payroll mobility tax because it's a regressive form of taxing. It's a tax on an employer's payroll, which is why I co-introduced the corporate tax bill, which is a tax on profits, which is a progressive tax because employers cannot say, let me make less profits so that I pay less taxes, but employers can say, let me curb my payroll so that I pay less taxes. So I do not support payroll tax. My position was that MTA should have been funded with corporate tax. Most of these corporations are in New York City anyway.
May I?
1 minute.
One
So I
minute.
guess my question would be, why would you co-sponsor a bill that funnels money to the MTA without getting reappropriated every year by state legislators when that's the only way that we have to rein in what MTA is costing our constituents in northern Dutchess County?
Okay, we're going to have to end it there, but thank you both.
That's an extra response.
Okay. Okay. Excuse me. Hey, excuse me.
Please be seated.
It's okay.
Excuse me.
They're gonna get.
Please be
You know
seated.
what? You are going to have to leave if you
Ma'am,
No,
please be
we're
seated.
going to stop this.
It's okay.
You
They're
need-
gonna. It's
I
okay.
think
They're
we
gonna-
have it
they're
under
gonna give
control.
the
Thank
time.
you. I'm going to ask everyone, I know there's a lot of passion here. I'm going to ask everyone to hold it down. Everyone's going to get a chance to speak. No outbursts, please. This is an exchange. Thank you. Sarhana,
Yes.
going to give you 30 seconds to respond.
Everybody's going to be fair to me. Don't worry about it. So my bill that I co-sponsored is to get congestion pricing right, which is to make sure that the money that we are collecting from congestion pricing actually goes to good investments in public transit and not some, another waste of money. And I do that because I am a strong public transit advocate. We need public transit all over the state. We need regional authorities here. We need to expand our bus routes. So I will support public transit anywhere it is in the state because that's what we need to do. We need a serious statewide commitment, and we need to think of this as a state goal and a state benefit and not who gets what, because that's what's going to divide us, and we're not going to get anything.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Excuse me, please keep your responses down. Okay, the next question is about affordable housing, and this is to both candidates. Over the past 5 years, rents throughout this district have increased by anywhere between 25 to 45%. With inflation hitting a 40-year peak in 2022, there has been some relief in sight, but the basic cost of living, food, transportation, healthcare, and more are also out of reach for many. How do you see the role of the state legislature in ensuring plentiful, affordable housing for renters as well as prospective first-time buyers of homes? And what plans do you have to address this crisis? Let's start with Gabby.
Sure thing. So working off the progress from the Rent Stabilization and Tenant Protection Act of 2019, ensuring that our municipalities have the resources necessary to roll that program out, not just within the city of Kingston, but beyond. And so ensuring that they have the funding to perform those vacancy rate studies necessary to determine whether or not an area qualifies for rent stabilization. I think that that's, oftentimes we pass laws and they become enacted and we don't actually ensure that they're rolled out as intended and actually providing the solutions that they should have been. And so I think it's important that after we pass laws, we make sure that we roll them out and ensure that they're actually addressing the issues that we're facing. So working off of that Rent Stabilization and Tenant Protection Act to make sure that our tenants are protected and to stabilize rent prices where we can. Also bolstering our resources for our building codes and zoning departments so we can roll out some of these accessory dwelling units. I've heard from a lot of mayors and supervisors with regard to the issues they face in getting accessory dwelling units online within their municipalities. And so with these bolstered resources, they would be able to actually streamline that process and get them online quicker, which allows our seniors to stay in their homes if they so please, with an additional funding stream coming in from their new rental property, as well as adding to the rental stock available to tenants. We also have the highest rate of manufactured homes in Ulster and Dutchess compared to that of the rest of the state. So how do we better protect those tenants? Their plots are right for development because they already have water and septic established oftentimes. So we want to make sure that they're protected from these big developers that are going to come in, knock out the manufactured homes and build, what could be mini mansions. And so making sure that they have a right of first refusal so that they can join together and buy that development before a developer can come in and swoop it away. Those are some of the unique solutions that we can take advantage of here in Ulster and Dutchess that would be specific to our communities here and provide immediate relief. I'm not that concerned about what's going on in Long Island and New York City because they have their own respective assembly members. And so my priority is right here in Ulster and Northern Dutchess, finding those solutions for our constituents back at home.
Okay, thank you so much. Sarahana, would you like to respond?
So when people get priced out in New York City, they move here. Let's remember that. It adds to our squeeze on the housing market. Real estate lobbyists have spent millions of dollars blocking a price gouging tenant protection bill called Good Cause Eviction for many, many years. It's been more than 7 years that this bill has been kicking around in the legislature, and we were able to finally pass it because we made it an undeniable solution to let tenants stay if they have not done anything wrong. And I was able to include 2 provisions for upstate municipalities in the last minute, which is that municipalities can strengthen the provision when they opt in, such as what City of Kingston is trying to do now. And they can also, the governor had proposed that small villages and places with 5,000 or less people would not be able to opt in, and I fought against that tooth and nail, and they removed that piece from the bill. I'm co-sponsoring a green social housing bill to revive what New York used to do in the 70s very successfully under Governor Rockefeller, and what City of Vienna does right now, which is to build permanently affordable and high-quality homes capped at 25% of income for mixed income across the state. It's same quality no matter how much you're paying. And we used to do this in the 70s. We had a proto-social housing authority that built 33,000 affordable high-quality homes in just 5 years. Some of the things that were mentioned just now: first right of refusal for mobile homes, money for ADUs, first-time homeowner assistance. We actually did pass it through this budget, and we are hoping to see the results of that enactment. I will say that in the legislature, the support for tenants is very small because the real estate industry is one of the most powerful lobbyists in the state. And as for ETPA, actually we're looking at ways now to make declaring an emergency and opting into ETPA easier, because the way it's set up right now with vacancy studies is holding out most of the municipalities.
Okay,
May
thank
I?
you so much.
Really quickly?
1 minute to respond.
Sure thing. So the measures discussed by my incumbent that were solutions included, like good cause eviction, were actually voted against by the incumbent, despite being voted for by the prime sponsor, who actually introduced and authored the measure. And so when you talk about passing solutions that are bringing relief to our housing crisis, I'm unsure what you're talking about, because you voted against these measures.
Okay, I'm going to give Sarah Hanna 1 minute to respond.
Sure. So the budget process in New York is one of the most broken processes. We are asked to vote on many, many, many pages on a bill we've never seen before. So some of us, Democrat colleagues of mine, we vote no as a way to express discontent. I have never hidden the fact that I voted no. In fact, I sent a press release to Kingston Wire, to Daily Freeman. They ran the story. I voted no because I had said I cannot vote yes for a good cause eviction that leaves upstate tenants out, rolls back 2019 tenant protections, and does not fund vouchers, which Ulster County desperately needs. And I actually had let the Speaker of the Assembly know that, listen, I know you tried really hard, but I'm going to have to vote no on this budget. So it was not a surprise for him either. And Senator Skoufis, who has endorsed my opponent, also was one of the people to vote no for different reasons. But just to say that this is a pretty common practice when we want to express discontent for something we have very little control over.
Okay, thank you both.
Can I rebuttal to that or no?
Okay, we're going to start with a series of questions that will be directed to one candidate only. There will be an equal amount of questions directed to both candidates, and the other candidate will have a minute to rebut if she wants it. Okay, so this question is for Sarah Hanna. Sarah Hanna, you're a co-sponsor of the Not on Our Dime bill, which would prevent New York registered nonprofit organizations from, a website touting the legislation states, quote, sending tens of millions of dollars to fund war crimes waged by Israeli military units devastating Gaza and emboldened settlers expelling Palestinians from their homes, unquote. In a similar vein, Democrat Pat Ryan stated at a pro-Palestinian rally you attended was, quote, blatant anti-Semitism, unquote, and an, quote, insult to the memories of Israeli victims, unquote. Do you support Israel's right to exist and defend itself against attacks by Hamas and Hezbollah?
How many minutes do I have for this question? That was a lot of questions rolled into one. I'm being serious.
All right, we'll give you 3 minutes.
Okay, sure. So actually, my opponent and I agree that criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitic by default, because Jewish people cannot be held responsible for the actions of a government, just like Americans cannot be held responsible for the actions of Donald Trump. So I am really, really concerned about the rise in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, and I think we have to start separating those things so that people can calm down a little bit and not get into the vitriol. As for Not on Our Dime, these are tax-exempt charities that are using the money for things that are international crimes, and even President Biden, in so many words, has expressed support for the content of this bill, even though he probably does not know that this bill exists at the state level, but he has said similar things to the effect when it comes to settler violence. What was your third? You did have a third question.
The third question was, do you support Israel's right to exist and defend itself against attacks by Hamas and Hezbollah?
So that is a loaded question. I do support Israel's right to exist as of any country, but I support full democracy for every country, regardless of what race, what religion, what gender that country is housing as its citizens. I do not support occupation in any country, and I know many Jewish people who don't either. So again, we should not conflate those. But in terms of the response to Hamas, the thing is, I grew up in civil war in Nepal, and I know how people get recruited when they are very desperate. I don't believe Palestinians should be ruled by Hamas because I believe in secular democratic governments, and Hamas is not that. But what happens with this prolonged assault from the Israel side is it's going to help Hamas recruit into the future. And as a person who believes and wants democracy in that region, that does concern me. And I'm not the only one saying this. Many military experts have written long articles making the same analysis that the two sides are fighting different kinds of wars. And if we actually want peace in the region, we should do what the families of the hostages are saying in Tel Aviv, which is come to the table, talk about peace, talk about permanent ceasefire, and do a full exchange of hostages.
I do resent my opponent dragging me into her position on this matter because we are not aligned whatsoever here. I would not waste my time rallying around what Democratic leadership in the state legislature considers a non-starter bill when we have so many other issues right here at home that we are facing. It is a tragedy to see what's going on internationally. I think we can all agree that this death, this murder is horrible. To see such hate within our communities and to see it overseas, death, it's horrendous. And there's no argument to that. But again, to rally around a non-starter bill at the end of session when you have not authored and put forward any legislative solutions that are actually being enacted into law to address utilities, to address housing, to address mental health, that's unacceptable from our representatives. And again, to put off time and time again debate opportunities, opportunities to engage with your constituency, but then come home on the weekends to go and join protesters at college campuses, sending food over to Bard. That's unnecessary.
Okay, that's time.
If you're going to take a position, take it
That is
beside
time.
your constituents.
That's
All right.
time.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think that I got.
Okay, I have somewhat of a follow-up question. Listed as a quote-unquote recommended candidate by the Pro-Israel Solidarity PAC, which is targeting DSA candidates across New York in an apparent attempt to punish them for their pro-Palestinian stances. How much money have you accepted from the PAC, and why should your pro-Palestinian constituents believe you would give them a fair shake if they needed your help?
Yeah, so from the start of this campaign, when I was asked what my position on this matter was, I said that it was beside my constituents, all of my constituents, making sure that they feel supported and that they feel secure in their own home communities. So whether that's securing free international calls when this conflict first occurred, like we did in Skoufis's team, so families can get in touch, that's important. Opening up your office hours extended on the weekends and in the evenings to act as a resource hub so that they can access phones, computers to get accurate information. Making sure that we're getting fortification grants for places of worship so our constituents feel safe when going to practice their faith. That's where you should stand on a matter like this for all of your constituents by their side. And that's why I can't seem to understand why, these folks now contributing to my campaign as a result of your ignorance is now my problem. That's unacceptable. And so I think that, when you compare the contributions coming in from this one individual PAC compared to the majority of my contributions coming in from in-district constituents, all I hear is more rhetoric. All I hear is more red herring distractions to take voters away from the real issues and the lack of solutions that have been brought forth the past 2 years.
Okay. Excuse me, there will
honestly
be
don't
no questions yelled out from the audience. If you have a question, you could write it down, and we do encourage you to do that. Thank you. I'm going to give Sarah Hanna a chance to respond.
Yes, so in my opinion, the emotions around this issue is being exploited by the New York City real estate lobby, the venture capitalists, and the charter school proponents. And how do I know this? Because I can see what money they're spending. I have a lot of donations from my Jewish constituents as well, and maybe my opponent does too, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the CEOs of New York City's biggest real estate companies and the head of their lobbying farm, who have spent millions of dollars blocking bills like good cause eviction. One person running the Hudson Valley Voters PAC, its treasurer is George Fontes, who is the second top paid lobbyist in the state, and he was paid $1.4 million to block good cause eviction just last year. In terms of weekends and evening hours, I want to say something as a pro-worker, pro-labor candidate. One of the problems in our state government is that staffers are exploited. They are underpaid, they are overworked, and I'm not going to do something that is going to contribute that. We are fully working 24/7 in our capacity to cater to constituents' services and requests. And if my opponent gets elected, she will know how many people wrote to me asking me to support Not on Our Dime, asking me to support a ceasefire. Regardless of where my constituent is, on either side, I know that this is deeply important to them, which is why I have also been engaging constituents who don't agree with me, but to say that
that's
something
time.
so important to them is not relevant to our job is not true.
Thank you. We're at time.
May I?
Dan?
Do you want a minute?
Yeah, just
1
really
minute
quick.
for a rebuttal.
Again, calling something like this a winning issue after a conflict first occurred on October 7th is unacceptable, and that's what we saw from the incumbent.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to move on from that topic. This question is for Sarah Hanna. Your opponent has described you as, and we're paraphrasing here, focus too much on larger causes and not enough on the specific needs of the 103rd Assembly District. What's your response to that?
My response is I wish my opponent had attended one of the over dozen town halls we did last year, because she would have known how many short-term and medium-term solutions that we talked about, how many bills I co-sponsor that are in the short term, over 300 bills, and how many of those I have actually helped to pass, which is 79 of them in my short 18 months. So here's the thing. Why are we running for office if we are fine with the things as they are, and we think it's working fine? Why are we running for office? I'm working for office because I'm not fine with the way things, the way they are. Something needs to give. Central Hudson, just because I talk about larger issues, which by the way means systemic issues, which means getting to the root cause, doesn't mean I'm not working. We spend 99% of our office capacity on Central Hudson. I'm the only state legislator to intervene in the rate case, and everybody told me, don't do it, it's going to be too much work. But you know what? It was worth it, because it went from settlement negotiations to litigation track, which is what we want, and it means that Central Hudson can only get an increase for 1 year instead of 3 years. So there is no record to say that I'm not doing things for my constituents. My opponent has never reached out to my office, has never attended our events. The first time she signed up to my email list was after she decided she was going to run.
You want a minute?
Could you just reiterate the question? Sorry.
Oh,
I forgot what the question was based on that response.
the question was, this is for Sarah Hanna, so this is what we asked Sarah Hanna. Your opponent has described you as, and we're paraphrasing here, focus too much on larger causes and not enough on the specific needs of the 103rd Assembly District. What's your response to that? And you have 1 minute.
Yeah, so I think that the reason that you should pursue public office is to serve the district that you're elected to represent. I think it should start with your constituents first and foremost. Your number one priority is these individuals that rely on you to provide real relief. You are the shoulder to lean on. You are the lifeline to state entities. And so that needs to be your number one priority. Advancing policy, statewide policy that is extremely progressive measures, that's important. I speak to my work on that with the CLCPA, the Reproductive Health Act, for example. These are important measures, but as a legislator, you have to walk and chew gum. You're getting paid over $140 grand a year to do this job. You need to be able to balance a lot at once. And so when you're also addressing those long-term systematic issues with policy, you're providing immediate solutions. And I'm not seeing that. Co-sponsoring a bill is a matter of submitting what's called a buck slip to get your name added to a piece of legislation. That's a matter of seconds. That's a lot different than authoring a bill, introducing it, shepherding it through the committee process, getting it passed on both houses and enacted into law, and rolled out as intended. There's a huge difference between co-sponsorship and prime sponsorship, authoring a bill, advancing policy, and we're not seeing that.
Okay, that's time.
Sorry.
It's time.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move forward. This is sort of a flip side of that same question, and this is addressed to Gabby. Your opponent has described you as, and again, we're paraphrasing here, too deeply enmeshed in the power politics at the state capitol. And what is your response to that?
If serving as an effective representative, if serving from the ground up with the community by your side being the number one priority is considered some type of establishment, then that's news to me. As a 28-year-old young woman that has worked in the state legislature for the past 6 years, worked my keister off to get to where I'm at and establish the relationships that I have and advance the policy that I do, working with our nonprofit organizations, working with our advocacy groups, working with fellow legislators, not just in the state legislature, but municipal and federal counterparts. That's how I have really made a difference in the lives of my constituents. And so if that's considered an establishment candidate or a corporate candidate, I just don't understand that.
Sarah Hanna, would you like a minute?
Give me the question again.
Oh, sure. So
Being enmeshed.
yeah, that you had said that she was too enmeshed in power politics in the state capitol.
Yeah, so I did not say that, but I have said that what we represent is I'm trying to break off from the status quo, and my opponent is pushing the status quo, which I think is not very exaggerated. So I really believe that every important fight that we have won in our history were fights that were told were impossible. And they were not won because of some insider track trickery. They were won because it mobilized masses of people, because people took personal risks to stand up for something, and it created such pressure that those things happened. Women's right to vote. How many people went to jail for that? How many people were persecuted for that? Ending slavery. How many people lost their lives? But just because it was difficult does not mean, that it was not worth it, and nobody waved a magic wand to make those things go away. People fought to earn those things, and I'm on the inside to represent that kind of movement. I'm on the inside to represent what people want. And that's how we won the Build Public Renewables Act. Again, I was told we were not going to pass this bill. We passed it in 6 months. And we did it not because we made some handshake deals, but because we did inside-outside organizing. We mobilized all over the state, including
Okay.
my district,
That's
and we got
time.
it done.
And we're at time. Thank you so much. Okay.
Okay, this following question is for Gabby. We heard from several, oh wait, are we out of order here? Sorry, excuse us.
Yeah, because that was the other one.
It was sort of addressed. So we could skip ahead.
Okay, we're going to skip ahead.
Do you want me to ask the next one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
So this next question is for Sarah Hanna. There's an impression about your first term in office that constituent services were just not a priority for you. We received this concern from a number of readers. How do you respond to that allegation, and what are some examples of your work you did for constituents in your district?
Sure. So the first thing we did when we got into office is send a mailer to all 135,000 people in our district saying, here's what you can get help from our office on. And many of those people responded, and some of them said, I didn't even know the state assembly existed. Many of them said, I didn't even know I had a second state representative, which is to say we started doing constituent services from day one. But here's the thing. Constituent service is difficult because we're trying to solve problems in a very broken system, and lots of people don't know what kind of help that they can get. In fact, some of the early cases that we solved were left over from my predecessor's office. People who said, I wrote to your predecessor, it didn't happen, can you still help me? And we did many of those things. When it comes to navigating the red tape with Department of Labor, DMV, Department of Taxation, Finance, you name it. We've gone above and beyond to go to tenants in their buildings, stop evictions, to stop Central Hudson shutoffs. We have placed folks in emergency housing, even though that is such a difficult thing to do. People actually write to us all the time about the level of attention that we provide them. I have personally responded to emails on Saturdays because I don't want my staff working on the weekends. So there will always be some people who maybe did not hear back, even though when 2 people came to us recently to say that we did not hear back, we went back and see what happened. It turned out that they forgot to write back to us. So these things happen. We have always done constituent services. I will say the rumor started in a certain Kingston Wire column. When a certain columnist said that at the Saugerties debate, I said constituent services is not important. I went back and watched the recording. Turned out I never said that.
That's interesting, because I've requested that recording and can't seem to get a copy of it, so I'm glad that it exists somewhere.
I have it.
Okay. Okay. Well, there you go. We have consensus.
Do you want a minute?
Yeah, absolutely.
Minute to Gabby.
I know for a fact that constituent services are not a priority because I've heard from the constituents, and when I go door to door, I see these real life issues. And if you were working with your constituents, you would have a long list of new bills that you've already introduced to bring real change and real relief to these constituents that I'm meeting door to door. So there is no way that you are actually providing those constituent services. I've seen people tug on your door at your office many a time and be rejected because it is locked. I don't even know if you have normal operating hours. And so there is a clear vacancy of constituent services being provided. And you gave some examples just now, but the passion behind that is lacking. When you can actually change someone's life by serving as their advocate, by serving as their lifeline, problem solving with Office of People with Developmental Disabilities to get that ramp put on someone's house so that a little boy in a wheelchair can get to his school every day with the rest of his kids on a bus. That's life-changing stuff, and that to me is worthwhile. That matters. There is value behind each and every constituent that you represent, and you should not even second guess that. Constituent services is the pillar of public service. It's how we reach our constituents. It's how we serve as a lifeline for them. It's how we identify gaps in existing laws so we can address them systematically.
Okay, thank you. We are at time. I'm going to give Sarahana 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, so for our office, we moved into 1 Albany Avenue, which is my predecessor's office, right away. Then we were told on the second day there's actually a mold issue and we're going to have to move out in July. So we stayed there through July, we found another place, and then the landlord there said, actually, we are 3 months late. You're going to have to wait a little bit more. The landlords at 1 Albany Avenue were nice enough to let us stay. And then recently there was a pipe burst in the building over which we had nothing to do. If you would like to take this up with my landlord, I encourage you, I implore you, I welcome you, because if we are having this kind of issues with our landlord, I can't imagine what kind of issues regular tenants are having. But in terms of constituent services, we have 3.5 positions in our office. Only 1 of them is on the legislation and Albany side. The rest are all taking care of district needs. We work day in and day out. The reason there are so many issues is because the system is broken. It's leaving people behind. That's why we also need the larger fixes.
Results, not rhetoric. I'm sorry. That's
sorry, we need to move on.
No. Next question, which is for Gabby. We heard from several readers who want us to ask you about the donations you've accepted from the real estate industry and hedge fund investors like Hal Fettner, CEO of Fettner Properties and a member of the influential Real Estate Board of New York. How do you respond to those who say taking those donations makes you beholden to the powerful real estate lobby?
I think that this is being used as a distraction again to avoid pointing to a vacant record. There is no legislative record to point to. There's an absence of constituent service work. So obviously you're not going to defend that record. Instead, you're going to pull at straws to try to expose me for things I'm not responsible for. A contribution does not equate to a position on policy. It does not equate to your approach to governance, nor the service you're providing to your constituents. These realtors, these agencies are also the individuals that are developing new housing. We need new housing stock within Ulster and Dutchess counties if we're going to address this housing crisis. Unfortunately, the incumbent has not put forth any solution solutions that are going to increase housing stock here in Ulster and Northern Dutchess. So that being said, maybe they see that the individual that's best suited to actually address this housing crisis is the person that's working with RUPCO, that's working with housing and community renewal, that knows how to get development online so it can actually serve the constituents represented and actually provide solutions to the housing crisis we're facing. That's the only thing that I can point to with regard to those contributions coming in.
Sure. If you want details on those contributions, sarahhannafораssembly.com/spending-against. So I just want to start with, there is one group that is the biggest advocate of more housing, all kinds of housing in the state. That's Open New York. Guess who they've endorsed? Me. Also, this year, we have the new public finance program. Both my opponent and I maxed out. We each get $175,000 in matched public funds, matching small dollar donations from the district. Why do we need these corporate donations when we have this program? $170,000 is more than enough for an assembly race. My opponent has spent so much money that even though I raise so much less, I still have more cash on hand. Okay? That's what happens when you spend $90,000 on one consultant firm to do your comms. That's how politics works. So absolutely disagree on the influence of corporate donors. If we want results and rhetoric, we say no to corporate donations, and we stick to that principle.
May I?
Yeah, 1 minute for Gabby.
I think it's really important to look at the transparency of these funding resources as well. So I've been very transparent from the start. I'm going to have to fundraise competitively. My opponent in 2022 had nearly $1 million behind her campaign. So obviously I know that I'm going to have to raise a lot of funds if I'm going to compete within this race. Bringing that type of dollar amount to this assembly district was not my doing. Unfortunately, yes, I do have to partake in public campaign finance. I do have to partake in fundraising competitively. Where those contributions come from, again, do not influence the position that I take, the representation that I provide. And when we're talking about contributions, let's remember 2022. There is dark money involved here, and my opponent is taking PAC funds as well. And so if you don't believe me, look it up for yourself. Google the Tide Foundation, Google For the Many, for the DSA. All of these individuals are taking contributions that are from these corporate entities, far larger than the ones that I'm being pointed a finger at for accepting. And so I think it's important that we're actually following the breadcrumbs and doing our due diligence and that independent research to make sure that you know the facts of, if you're actually not accepting corporate contributions, I don't think that that's true, and not being transparent is even more problematic for your constituents. Again, transparent since day one.
That's time. Thank you.
Okay.
That sounds like I should get a chance to respond.
I think we need to move on
Okay.
in deference to time. Okay, I have a question. Sarah Hanna, as a democratic socialist, you represent some of the more progressive elements of the Democratic Party, whereas you, Gabby, seemingly represent the more mainstream forces of the party. How different are your individual policies and approaches, and do you see the perceived divisiveness between the two sides of the party as something that further refines the goals of the party or ultimately weakens it? And I'm going to ask Gabby to start.
So I think that it's important that we're delivering results to point to throughout the district so that we can get more Democrats elected in New York State and grow those democratic values. So it's concerning when we see a Democrat that's in office that isn't actually delivering those solutions despite holding that supermajority within the state legislature. Capital projects, for example, tangible policy that's actually being implemented within our communities that we represent. Again, that's what helps grow those democratic values and get Democrats reelected. With regard to my opponent's position on a lot of these measures, we are aligned, but approach to governance is what counts here, right? And so it's funny that I'm considered more of a mainstream candidate when I have, again, worked on some of the most progressive policy in New York State. Serving as a young woman in the state legislature, how established can I actually be? How much of a corporate candidate can I actually be? I think that our goals are aligned, but I think the methods in which we take to get there are very different. My approach to governance is from the ground up with the community by my side, prioritizing the constituents I'm elected to represent. It's not, bringing a national agenda that is already preset and applying it to a community that you identified as vulnerable and decided to run there. I think that that's problematic. And I think, again, approach to governance is what counts. Bringing those real solutions, those real results back to your district is the difference between myself and my opponent. You have an agenda and we're not on it. That's problematic.
Okay, thank you. Sarah Hanna, would you like to respond to the question?
Yes, I think our agenda is on it because I was elected by over 7,900 people, and that's pretty
Out of
good,
130,000.
it's my turn, sorry.
Excuse
It's
me,
a
no
pretty good
interruptions.
testament to what people elected me to do. So I want to name a few differences. I've been to many meetings and forums now where we have a clear difference not only in corporate donations but also the New York Health Act. I am a champion of the New York Health Act. Our healthcare system is deeply broken. Our hospital funding is deeply broken. This is partly why I have been endorsed by the Nurses Union, and my opponent has been critical of this bill. The other clear difference is I believe in short-term solutions because people don't have time. I believe in medium-term solutions because we need to look ahead. But I also, importantly, believe in long-term solutions, and you have heard that difference here. The third difference is accountability. The only group I am accountable to is people. It's not a party, it's not an organization, it's not for the many, it's not Tides Foundation, whatever you want to name it, it's people. So when 7 out of 9 Kingston Common Council members and many, many tenants in my district wrote to me saying, please vote no on the housing deal, I listened to them and voted no. Was it a risky situation? Yes, people don't like, to be called out. It was a risky decision. Was it worth it? Yes, because that was a test for myself. Can I bear this risk? Can I stand up when it's difficult? And I was able to. And did something negative come out of it? Absolutely nothing. I have a great relationship with the Speaker of the Assembly. I told him, hey, do you know the first meeting place of the Assembly is Kingston? You should come visit, and I'm going to bring him here so that he can take a photo with that sign at Four Corners.
May I?
1 minute.
So coming from the Senate majority and previously working in the Assembly majority, I know that that's untrue. And it's such a disservice for you to look in the eyes of your constituents and say something like that. You do not work with your majority colleagues in neither the State Assembly nor the State Senate, nor the municipalities back at home. Who holds office for 2 years and doesn't have an open line of communications with the mayors, supervisors, and council members in which they represent? That does not
Decorum,
make sense
please.
to me. And so saying that you have these relationships with these other legislators, I just don't see that. No one sees that. And taking photos with, Governor Hochul's face on a tombstone, for example, is certainly not helping out our district. And your no votes as a freshman member are jeopardizing our access to tax dollars coming back home, which is hurting our most vulnerable populations. These nonprofits, these service organizations, school districts, all of these individuals that rely on it, that's unacceptable. You can't jeopardize those for a personal ideology or a personal stance that you take. That's just to get headlines, that's unacceptable.
Okay.
Can I say one thing?
Okay,
Sure.
I'm gonna
30
give you
seconds.
30 seconds.
I just wanted to give a shout out to the person who made the tombstone because they're in this room and they're our constituents.
Okay. Thank you. To the tombstone maker.
You're the representative. You're the representative. You have to
okay,
maintain a
guys.
standard of governance.
Guys.
It's unacceptable.
Decorum, please.
Please. Okay.
Okay, this question is for both. Many Hudson Valley cities, including Kingston, have areas that qualify as food deserts where it's difficult for folks living there to get access to healthy foods they can afford. Do you see a role for state government in addressing this problem? If so, how? And I think you're up, Gaddy.
I would start by voting in support of the Healthy School Meals for All, which would provide healthy school meals for our students, utilizing our homegrown agriculture product to do so. Unfortunately, our incumbent voted against that. And so obviously this would be a big priority for me. Serving in this district that has the #1 industry was agriculture until it became agritourism. We know that agriculture is a huge part of our local economy here. And we also know that it's a way of life for a lot of our farmers. Speaking with these farmers that have been here for generations, they are struggling. They are on the brink of shutting down. And so we have to make sure that we're stepping up to be that resource for them. We have someone that's in the state Senate that chairs the Agriculture Committee for us right now and is also our representative. That means that we have access to a lot of these solutions. We have the opportunity to serve as a partner to that state Senate representative in the Ag Committee and put forth real solutions that bring real relief for our farmers and in turn for our constituents here, including our students with those healthy school meals that I can't seem to understand why anyone would vote against that.
So we're still talking about the same budget vote. In the budget, there's one bill, it's 10 bills. There's one bill called the Big Ugly. It's where they cram a lot of things. It's where they don't let you see the bill language until the very last minute. And it's how you pass these things because you don't really get to discuss the individual pieces. You cannot vote yes or no on the individual pieces. It's thumbs up or thumbs down, that's it. So universal school meals was in it, and guess who else voted no along with me? The lead sponsor in the Assembly of Universal School Meals, Assemblymember Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, who has endorsed me for my re-election. And we had the same reason for voting no on this bill, because we spent over 4 months on a bill rolling back bail reform and giving the governor what they wanted, what her team wanted, and when it was time to get to the housing negotiation, which is what she was supposed to give us in return, she said, actually not this year. Okay, so some of us voted no on this, including the person who introduced this bill. But you know how many rallies I've done in support of universal school meals? Every rally that's happened in Albany, I'm there. And you know who fought this time to expand the program instead of unnecessarily cutting it down, because we almost did it 100%? We didn't last year. Again, I'm not sure why the government didn't do it last year fully, because it was just a matter of a few $million of a multi-billion budget, and we fought to fully expand it this year. She didn't want to do it. Guess who'll be back next year fighting for it? Me, again, for universal school meals.
Okay. This is going to be the last question, because we want to make room for questions from all of you. This is going to be the last question from us directly, because we want to make room for questions from the audience. Child care in the Hudson Valley is dwindling, expensive and struggling to remain viable under stress from demographics, economics, and shifting policies. How do you intend to address this shortage and make the area a more thriving place, as well as a realistic destination for families with young children? And I'm going to start with you, Sarahana.
Sure. So I have met many constituents, specifically women, who are now not doing their job because they cannot get childcare. And this is a very troubling trend. On the whole, what's happening is the reason we don't have childcare workers and the reason we don't have enough home care workers, the reason we don't have enough nurses, is because we pay them very little, considering the expense that they are expected to bear to live in this area. In Ulster County and Dutchess County, if you're a single parent with one child, the livable wage is around $40 an hour. Are childcare workers getting paid $40 an hour? Absolutely not. No. So I co-sponsor many bills on the childcare front, from short-term, medium-term to long-term, which is the universal childcare program, which again would be a fraction of our budget if we wanted to do it. And I'm very happy to support a full spectrum of initiatives in childcare. And even though we did pass some things for childcare in this year's budget, again, it fell short, and we were not given a good reason for why it fell short. So there were many of my Democratic colleagues who were very unhappy with how little we did for childcare this year.
Okay, thank you. Gabby, would you like to respond?
It fell short on your watch during your incumbency. I hear a lot about the issues and no solutions that were put forth. A lot of, I don't know why the governor did this. So what did you do about it as our representative? That is where my concern comes in. You can expand UPK seats within the school districts in which you represent. This is something that I was successful in doing in Senator Skoufis's office down in Orange County, working directly with these school districts to expand the seats made available so that this lottery system isn't negatively impacting so many of these students that aren't making the cut. And so by working with your school districts directly, of which you do not have an open line of communication, you do not meet with annually in advance of the state budget, so you can actually advocate on behalf of their needs and on behalf of their funding priorities. Without those lifelines, you're not going to be able to have a finger on the pulse of what those needs are. And that's concerning to me. How can you actually assist in expanding those UPK seats so that all of our students can get a seat in the room? This is something that was only offered to New York City students for years now, and then Senator Skoufis introduced a bill to make it a statewide measure. And I'm so glad that he did, but we need to fully fund it on a state level so that school districts aren't making up for that gap. We also have to make sure that when we're contracting with these third-party child care providers through the school districts, that the reimbursements are sufficient enough, that the reimbursements are on a schedule that is suitable for these third-party providers. So there's a lot of issues that do exist within that, but it takes effective representation to problem solve on behalf of those school districts and ensure that we're expanding the seats made available to our students, all of which is feasible, and I can say that with certainty because I was able to achieve that in a staff capacity.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to questions from the audience.
And we'd like to thank everyone for their questions. They were really great. Okay, the first question is for both. New York has the worst home care worker shortage in the United States. The 103rd Assembly District has hundreds of people who cannot find home care. endangering their lives. What solutions would you offer as an assembly member? And I think, Sarah Hanna, you're up.
Sure. So the people who made that tombstone was in fact our home care workers, and the reason is for 2 years in a row, we have hit a roadblock in terms of investing in our home care workers. Some of them are choosing to flip burgers because it's much easier and pays more. We lead in the home care crisis. We are #1 in the state. Why should that happen considering we are also the richest state and we have record economic growth, we have a record number of millionaires. So this is a question of priority, but in terms of doing something about the solution, we need to increase home care wages. That's a bill called Fair Pay for Home Care. We also need to cut some of the for-profit middlemen from the managed home care that we have right now, which has wasted an estimated $5 billion already. And if we cut this program out, which is a bill that I'm a prime co-sponsor on, then not only would we bring a lot of money back into the hands of home care workers, we would also save a lot of money.
So home care is obviously a major priority for us, and it's going to be a growing priority in New York State as our aging seniors, that population increases, which is what we're anticipating over the years. We want to ensure that these individuals can stay in their homes because we do not have the availability within nursing homes and assisted living facilities, so we have to make sure that we're providing the resources and the support to allow them to stay in their homes. There's a bill that I had worked on with Al Cardillo, who runs the Home Care Association of New York State. This is called the Home Care First Act. This bill would address a lot of the issues we're seeing with home care, including those wages. It would also cut through some of those insurance bureaucracies that we have with hours approved for these individuals, for the home care workers that can actually go in and work, the transportation components and the restrictions that require numerous different home care workers to come in and work various different shifts instead of just one person being there, streamlining that process. This is an all-encompassing, comprehensive bill that was put forth by the Home Care Association that services these individuals at home that need this help. And it's not just our aging seniors, it's also our individuals with disabilities. There's constituents that I've worked on, with time and time again to help them identify home care workers that can be available for them and actually serve the needs that they have. There's a variety of different issues right now, including the pipeline to get these individuals licensed. That's through Office of the Professions. So while I'm working towards the Home Care First Act, I'm also making sure that I'm problem solving in real time for those individual constituent cases, helping them work through that red tape with insurance companies, helping to ensure that they're getting the number of hours approved, helping to make sure that they have the transportation necessary for those home care workers and for them so that they can make it to their different doctor's appointments. It's important that you're hands-on with those communities while still working with those larger entities, but again, walk and chew gum at the same time. You're a legislative representative. You're expected to do that. So pursue those long-term solutions while working towards those short-term immediate solutions.
Okay, thank you. What state efforts towards equity do you support? What efforts in DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, would you like to see? And I'm going to start with you, Gabby.
Yeah, I would like to see this in our places of work, of employment. I want to make sure that we have individuals that are giving great employment opportunities so that they can actually make a living wage and do well, not just survive. I want them to thrive, right? And so I think that if we do a better job at workforce development opportunities here in Ulster and Northern Dutchess, good paying jobs in the area that these individuals can get into right out of high school too. We know that SUNY and CUNY enrollment is declining, so how do we accommodate that? How do we make solutions and meet that new need now? We provide better workforce training opportunities that are going to result in very good paying jobs coming right out of it so that we can build up that generational wealth and change what inequities exist right now. I think that workforce is really the place to do this because, again, it's a generational wealth component. In addition to homeownership, I see that as being another solution as well, working with some of the programs that existed through HCR that unfortunately don't have the funding coming to them anymore but have proven extremely successful, especially in Ulster County specifically. We want to extend that over to Northern Dutchess. We want to make sure that we're bolstering and funding those programs that have proven success. But again, I think it starts with workforce development, and I think that it starts with homeownership. And so those would be the two areas that I would prioritize.
Okay, thank you. Sarah Hanna, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Sure, so equity is really a big word because it plays out everywhere, and while I would love to take credit for something, all of these problems existed long before my time. I just want to point that out. I've been in office for 1.5 years, and we're trying to solve big crises that have been brewing through decades. So when it comes to equity, I also want to talk about public safety. Yesterday, I canvassed a man in the town of Ulster, and he said, as I was leaving, he said, "Remember me, I'm going to do something good with my life." And that really moved me because that's what our job is. There are lots of people who want to do good with their life. We have taken away the tools with prolonged divestments in public goods for them to able to do so. So what does public safety mean? We need stable housing. Do people have it right now? No. 32% of my constituents are renters. Over 50% of them are rent burdened, which means they are paying more than 30% of their income on rent. Almost 30% of homeowners are housing cost burdened. So housing, big crisis, not going to be solved with a magic wand in 18 months, but we are making progress. Healthcare. When people are of a particular gender identity, a particular income bracket, they really have a hard time accessing basic healthcare services. So that's one thing. The other is when people are housed and when people can make sure they are healthy, they need to be able to take advantage of opportunities such as public schools and SUNYs. Why did we start this year with the governor proposing double-digit cuts to schools all across the district, including 4 districts in my assembly district? Here's the good news. We rejected those cuts. It was a lot of work, but people had already been laid off because school budget doesn't sync up with the state budget. And once people go to school and get education, they need jobs. And they don't need bad jobs. They need good, well-paying union jobs. And that's the full tools that we need to provide in terms of equity.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, next question, and this is for both of you. What will each of you do to assist counties in the continuing solid waste crisis in New York State, with little state efforts seen as of late? And Gabby, I think you're up.
Yeah, so obviously serving as that lifeline to the state entities that do exist that can help provide some of these resources. There's a lot of grant funding out there that we can tap into to bring those tax dollars back home that would address a lot of these issues on a municipal and county level. But again, I think it starts with having that lifeline with your county representatives as well as those state entities that issue a lot of these different funding resources. I think that's the only way that we're going to be able to address this without impacting our taxes for our localities, is by tapping into those state and federal dollars. And again, that's how you serve. You connect that lifeline to your constituents, to your county representatives, so that they can speak with those administering agencies, figure out how can I mix and match these funding streams? When do I apply? What's going to bolster my application? How do we partner with neighboring counties to make sure that we're maximizing the effectiveness of the solutions that we're bringing forward? And so again, I see solutions out there, they're just not getting tapped into by the current representative. And so that's our job, is to serve as that lifeline, that connector to those entities for our constituency and county government. And that goes for not just county government, but municipal government and federal counterparts as well.
Okay, thank you so much. The next question is also an audience
Do I
question.
get to answer it?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Oh,
Sorry about that.
I apologize. Apologies.
So we do have open access to all of our local electeds. Let's clarify that. And when our mayor writes to us asking us to carry something in the budget letter, to do something that the municipality needs, we do those things and we get back to all of our local electeds. Because if I didn't, that would be insane. But in terms of solid waste, so the Assembly really wanted to pass the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act this year. We started off with pledged 84 votes. In the very last hour, as the industry heard that we were going to pass this bill, what happened? They started lobbying my colleagues, and what happened? We went from 84 votes to 60. We lost the committed votes in order to put this bill on the floor, so we did not pass it. This is the influence of corporations and lobbyists on our government. We have 102 Democrats in the Assembly. We should not have to scramble for 84 votes on a bill that not only reduces single-use plastic by 50% over 12 years, but also gives exactly those resources to municipalities, which is why I received several resolutions in support of this bill from many of the municipalities I represent. So what are we going to do? We are going to go back and we're going to get 84 votes and we're going to pass this bill.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for interrupting earlier. This is an audience question. Do you have a true plan to tax the wealthy in New York State? Sarah Hanna.
I would love to answer that since I co-sponsor 6 of them and co-introduced one of them. So, New York's wealth is higher than countries like Sweden. We have more wealth than countries in Europe. Why? Because we have a small number of people who have concentrated wealth. This year, middle-class people have fled the state. They cannot afford to live here. People cannot afford to start families here. But millionaires have increased in numbers. Why did, in my first year in office, did Mike Bloomberg send mailers to my district saying, ask your assembly member to vote yes on the governor's budget? Because I was very committed to wealth equity legislation in the budget. Now, we did get some. I don't want to say we didn't get any, so our effort did pay off. We extended the corporate tax provision, which was going to expire, and this is on corporate profits. This is the one that I had co-introduced in the assembly. So we don't have wealth equity in New York, but what we like to do from the top is pass tax increases that hit the working class, whether it's gaming revenues or any other kind of revenues, tobacco tax or whatever you have it. I would much rather just hit those big corporate profits and those big billionaires and those untaxed wealth assets that are just sitting around collecting dust, not regenerating wealth in our state.
Yeah, so I would be supportive of those wealth taxes, but I would also introduce a new bill that would set an inheritance tax above a certain threshold. So if you're inheriting, let's say, over $2.5 million, you would have to pay into this inheritance tax. Already exists? I don't think so. That's current state law?
Okay.
No,
the bill exists.
Right.
Okay,
So
let
these
her
are
finish.
these are solutions that we should be supporting, not just throwing a blanket statement over supporting a wealth tax. I think that's definitely something I would want to contribute to and I would want to advocate in support of, but I think an inheritance tax would be more impactful and more easy to pass too, so that we could get those real relief, that real solution on the ground, so that we can fund, let's say, our public schools instead of having them tied to property tax. Let's use an inheritance tax as a funding stream so our students' quality of education is not based on their zip code and taxpayers are not footed with the bill. If we can utilize some of those different revenue streams like the inheritance tax, like some of the wealth taxes, I've toyed with a stock transfer tax, but I am weary of unintended consequences of where business is going to be taken. But I think that there's wealth measures, inheritance tax, all of those should be tapped into, and we shouldn't be, footing this bill on the working class families. That is the truth.
Okay, thank you so much.
Well, we're getting actually I think it's later than 7:30.
getting very hot.
Almost 7:30. It's hot. Do you want to go to closing statements?
Yeah, I think we should. Yeah. We started with Gabby, so Sarah Hannah, your closing statement, please.
So you kind of have to be a little bit crazy to get into politics. That's a fact. You really have to believe that you are somehow one amongst over 200 people in the state legislature going to make a difference, and that this difference is going to be worth endless hours of personal time you sacrifice, personal family time you sacrifice, that it's going to be worth it. So what are those things that I believe in? I would not have run for office and worked so hard to win if I did not believe that this district I represent is hungry to lead the state. Hungry not just to fight for scraps for ourselves, but actually all of New Yorkers. We can lead. We don't have to be in the back seat. We don't have to be in the shadows of New York City. We are up there. Home care, we are leading the conversation. Tenant protections, City of Kingston is leading the conversation. So I am representing the values of this district. Nobody sent me to Albany to lead from fear of failure. They sent me because we have to try. It doesn't matter if we fail. There's no such thing as wasted effort, and if I wasn't gonna try, I would not be asking for anyone's votes. I would much rather snuggle with my puppy and watch all of the episodes of Netflix shows. It is a really hard job, and the most difficult part of the job is how demoralizing it is. I have to remind myself in Albany, why am I even trying today? There's so many obstacles, why am I trying today? And it's because my constituents believe in me, and because they sent me to Albany, I have to try on their behalf.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, everybody, and now we have Gabby Madden's closing statement.
Thank everyone for coming tonight. I really do appreciate it, and I hope that everyone walks away with a solid understanding of their two candidates and feels confident in casting that ballot this primary election. I think that, from my standpoint, it's a clear contrast of who your candidates are and the way that they approach governance. Myself being very community-oriented, working with the communities in which I represent, ensuring that I'm maximizing the effectiveness of representation by working with municipal leaders and federal counterparts. It is not about an ego. It is not about ideologies. It is about the people within this district, the people that helped to raise me in the community that I love so much. This is my lifeline, and I want to serve as everyone's lifeline here, two state entities and two state solutions. Again, why did I decide to run? Because there was a clear absence the past 2 years. It's not like I woke up one day and said, I'm going to run for office. I saw a real need, and it became a responsibility to serve the people that have helped to raise me here in this community. There was an absence of constituent services, if any at all. There is not any bills being authored and progressed through the state legislature and advanced and actually enacted into law. We have 0 pieces of policy coming from this district. We have barely any of our tax dollars coming back home. We just got our detox beds. The certificate of need has been amended. This has all been on the incumbent's watch, and we need to hold this individual accountable. We need to hold government accountable, and that's what I'm doing right now on behalf of this district. We have missed out for 2 years, and we cannot stand by and allow another 2 years to go by. We're at a crucial point where our population is growing, and we need to strengthen the fabric that binds us within this community, and the only way we're going to do that is with effective leadership, effective representation that works for the people and only the people. Going to Albany, seeing through the lens of this district is what I am capable of. It's what I will promise. I'm not bringing a New York City specific agenda that I am trying to manipulate up in Albany and push onto my constituents. This is a community-based legislative portfolio that is specific to the needs of the constituents here. 150 assembly members. I'll let the rest of those assembly members take care of the rest of New York State, and I will take care of this district, 103 Ulster and Northern Dutchess County. Again.
Okay, everybody, you can clap.
Thank you, everybody. That wraps up our debate. Stay tuned. We're going to have, hopefully, more debates as we get closer to Election Day. But now would be a great time to let loose even more applause for all our great candidates and moderators.
Thanks for coming, everybody. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
It was hot.